we have to be responsible. We have to pay more attention. We have to learn. We have to listen to things like this to create awareness, to talk about things that are uncomfortable, because in the darkness and in the silence is where this abuse thrives.
Welcome back, everybody, to this week's edition of the Lindsay Elmore Show. We're doing things a little bit different this week, and that is because my guest is one of the greatest mentors of my life, Laura Evans, and she tells her story so much better than I can. So I'm going to let her introduce herself in just a moment. However, I did want to give just a little bit of a trigger warning. Today, we are going to be talking about mental health and wellness. We're going to be talking about PTSD. We're going to be talking about human trafficking and the impact that sexual abuse can have on families. So, if any of that sounds triggering to you, maybe skip this episode and we'll see you next week. Laura Evans, I am so excited to finally have you on the Lindsay Elmore Show.
We're doing this.
We're finally doing this. We are. You and I have worked together for several years now, and we've been through ups, we've been through downs. You have absolutely seen me at my best and seen me at my worst and loved me through all of it, prayed me through all of it. I am so honored to get to interview you today and to truly call you a friend and a mentor. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, thank you so much, Lindsay. You know that I started as a fangirl of yours, following the Dr. Lindsay Elmore show and then communicating with you and connecting, and we had some things in common. So this is equally a really cool thing for me to be able to talk through these experiences and for your audience to hear, and the impact and the awareness that we can create. So my background is really a professional one for some large corporations, brand names that folks may recognize like J.Crew and Disney. And then I began working for some large companies in the network marketing industry. I was president for a couple of different companies that are $1 billion in size, and really enjoyed that. And after about 10 years at my last company in a corporate role, I just felt a real conviction in my heart and my spirit that I was neglecting my family in a pursuit of what I thought was providing for them. And I needed more balance. I needed to prioritize better. And I transitioned away from running a corporation to having my own small business, having my own business. Well, I say small. The business that we have now is over 48 million a year in revenue, just from what we've started and collected here.
Which is absolutely amazing, because we're talking more than 125,000 families. And why? Why do you do this? Because this is not the easiest of industries, but you have a really different reason for being within network marketing.
Yeah, coming from the corporate side, let's address that. When you are an executive in large companies and president of large companies, I was compensated very well for that, and I enjoyed that compensation. It allowed me to have some savings, have investments that I'm very grateful for. So I feel very blessed and thankful for that. And then striking out on your own and creating your own business, you're not really sure where that check is going to come from. You're not an employee anymore. You don't know that check is going to show up. You've got to create a little bit of interest and hustle on your own to create that. So that was a little scary to me. But the reason that I wanted to do that and make that shift was to have that flexibility with my family. And for me, I resonate so much more with what I'm able to do with the money I generate. One of my dear friends, Brooke Thomas, says that you have to generate to be generous. And that means a lot to me, because I'm looking at how I can pay it forward. And that's why I'm doing what I'm doing here. For me, I don't connect with being a 7-figure earner or an 8-figure earner or any of those kind of things that folks say. For me, I want to be a 6-figure giver. I want to find a way to give back. And in particular, from our lived experience, experiences and our family story, there's a foundation that's super important to us that we're the primary contributors to.
So, talk to us about those personal experiences that you went through that caused you to focus on mental health.
Yeah, for sure. So we are the proud, very proud parents of four amazing children who are grown and pretty much gone now. But at that time, several years ago, one of our teenage daughters attempted suicide, and that was very alarming for us. She is doing very well now, and I want everyone to know that we're super proud of her. And she recently graduated from college with a plant biology degree, and she kind of likes plants more than people, and you'll understand more about that. But she had gone through some experiences we were not aware of, and her outcry during that time with us was revealing that she had been sexually abused and trafficked by her best friend's dad, which was our next door neighbor in an upstanding neighborhood area in Texas. And so it just shook us. And all I could focus on was her choosing to live. All I wanted was for her to choose to live. A lot of people say, did you get justice right away? Were you angry? Yes, I felt all the feelings. I was angry. I was sad. I felt responsible. I felt guilty. I blamed myself. All of those things I felt. But the reality was, what I cared most about was her choosing to live. So we focused on her journey and her choice to any type of modalities that we could find. And I believe that it is a multifaceted process. And you certainly know this to be true as well. And you teach this as well, that it's not just, getting therapy and meeting with a psychiatrist, and perhaps getting on some type of medication for her PTSD and for her night terrors and for those kinds of things she was experiencing. But it is also, what can we do holistically that walks alongside for things to work at their best? And so we were pursuing all of it at one time, just like frantically pursuing everything for help for her. And we got it.
So, talk to us about when you look back at it now. Were there warning signs that you missed, or was this guy just so cunning and manipulative that it went kind of straight over your head? And what have you learned in your work with NAMI and your work with the Willowfield Foundation about what parents can look out for, even in what you just mentioned, a very affluent neighborhood, that can help to protect their children?
Oh, I've learned so much. And of course, as a parent, you're replaying scenes over in your head over and over and over again. What did I miss? And how come I didn't notice that? And I'll tell you some of the things, but I will also tell you one of the things that I chose to do was to seek information out. And I actually became a certified facilitator on Stewards of Children, which is produced by Darkness to Light, a nonprofit organization that for over 20 years has been doing education around child sexual abuse prevention, and obviously trafficking prevention as well. But some of the things and there's a link to an online training anyone can go through for that, and I highly recommend it to all adults, because the ending of this just awful thing from happening is not and should not be solely dependent on the courage of a child to speak up. It has to be on us as adults. We have to be responsible. We have to pay more attention. We have to learn. We have to listen to things like this to create awareness, to talk about things that are uncomfortable, because in the darkness and in the silence is where this abuse thrives. And he was a master manipulator, and part of the pleasure that he took out of this whole unfortunate circumstance was the power trip that he had on convincing all of us that he was a regular nice guy. He was the most liked guy in the neighborhood. He was popular with the kids. The kids always wanted to hang out with him. He had no criminal record or history. It was not the way that you would think that it would happen. And the things that I learned, for example, I'll throw a couple of them out here, is that when I picked my daughter up from ever staying, hanging out, she never spent the night away from us, by the way. So that's the other myth that a lot of people think, well, I don't let my child spend the night away. Well, good for you. I didn't either. This happened in the daytime, like in the
Mhm.
normal hours, like after school or Saturday mornings. And it happened over time through a grooming process for years that then escalated and escalated into abuse and then further. But an example is, when you pick your kids up from playtime or time hanging out with another group of kids, you ask them, hey, did you listen? Were you polite? Did you follow what the rules were? And you know what? To heck with that. I'm never asking my grandkids that. The reality is that our children are better behaved out of our sight most of the time than they are with us because they're so
Mhm.
comfortable with us. And when we are asking questions like that, we are reinforcing a narrative that the manipulator and the abuser is using against you to control your child. Well, your
Mhm.
mom said you got to listen to what I say. I'm the one in charge. I'm the adult. I wouldn't ask you to do anything that's not right to do because I'm the adult. And little things like that I learned. The other thing I learned is I would show up unannounced. I always thought it was polite to say, hey, I'm running late. I'm going to be there 5 minutes late. Or I'd say, hey, I'm coming early. I'm going to come over early and pick her up. Forget that. If somebody has your child at their house, and even if they're a trusted person, you think they're a trusted person, you feel absolutely comfortable showing up whenever you please, and you don't announce that you're showing up because you'll be
Mhm.
more likely to see what's really going on.
Talk to us about the grooming process. What does that mean? And what might a child be telling you that they don't quite understand, but there's something kind of in their heart of hearts that's going, something's wrong here?
Yeah. Yes, that's such a good question. So, the grooming process is just pushing boundaries, pushing limits to see how far out of line can the manipulator get before the child is uncomfortable enough to rat them out to the parent. And
Uh-huh.
so, and it's gaining the child's trust and confidence. So it could also be gift giving and making a child feel super special, developing that relationship to make that relationship between, and no adult should have a stronger relationship with your child than you as the parent or the
Mhm.
guardian child.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Mhm.
any adult that wants to be more important in your child's life should be given some consideration as to what is the
Yeah.
motivation behind it. But it can also be little things like maybe using off color language, maybe sharing an off color joke, maybe
Mhm.
just gradually turning up like the heat, turning up the inappropriateness to see how far do I have to push it before this child is uncomfortable and also runs and tells their parents, and then they come back and say something to me. And that's how they test. They test and test and test until it escalates too far, and then the child feels like it's their fault, and the manipulator tells them that.
I just listened to an Ed Milet show yesterday with Elizabeth Smart, and I think about how she was groomed and they took her all over town, right in her hometown, and she never spoke up. She never, went and ran to someone else and said, "I need help. Something is wrong." How can parents teach their kids to be empowered to speak up for themselves without scaring a child?
Yes. So parents can do that a couple of different ways. One, it's so important to tell your children over and over and over again that you can tell me anything. And that and I always tell parents, and I teach my grandkids, secrets are not safe. Surprises are fun, but secrets are not safe. If anyone says, let's keep a secret, find out if it's a surprise. Like if we're having a surprise birthday party for Lindsay, that's a surprise and that's fun. But see,
Mm-hmm.
someone asking you to keep a secret, you need to tell mom and dad if someone's asking you to keep a secret. And I would ask better questions, and that was something I learned as well. Is I would ask my daughter, did you have a good time? What did you guys do? And she would give like kind of generic answers, but I didn't take the time to be present enough in my own, criticism of how I could have done it better to have asked the next question. Did anything happen that made you feel uncomfortable? Was there anything weird that happened? The more open you are with your conversation with them, the more
Mm-hmm.
likely tell you, and then you can keep asking the next question and their confidence grows to tell you.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So, talk to us about NAMI and what that organization is, what it does, and why you decided to get involved with it.
NAMI is the National Alliance for Mental Illness, and it's a grassroots organization that was started by families who had children or loved ones that were diagnosed with a mental illness. And, many years ago, this was more and more around specific mental illness diagnosis, such as schizophrenia or bipolar, or it's become even more broad today with the kind of things that we see our society faces. But what I love about it is it's families helping families. It's a nonprofit, and so families are providing resources such as recommendations of care centers or doctors. And we also do training in the community. We train first responders on how to de-escalate and diffuse a mental health crisis, because first responders are often on the scene and it's not necessarily a criminal act, but it is a mental health crisis. So how do you de-escalate that? How do you handle that so that you can avoid hospitalization and incarceration in a circumstance? We also do speaking engagements. And this is something I am very passionate about, speaking at schools about ending the silence, which is suicide prevention. But for my daughter's best friend who contacted me and waved the flag and said, this is serious, you guys need to know something's going to happen, we may have a very different story that I would be sharing with you today. So I'm forever grateful for, if you know something, say something, get to an
Mm-hmm.
adult that can help.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And what about your foundation, the Willowfield Foundation? Talk to us about why you decided to start it and what your mission and vision is.
Sure. So our daughter inspired this foundation out of her heart of gratitude. We had the resources to provide her with whatever support she needed, whether it was covered by insurance or not. And other children that were like her did not have those resources. And she just felt such a debt of gratitude of, I got to do something, or I want to do something. I want to help others. And her therapist team joined together to create a foundation that would provide mental health therapy scholarships. And that's
Uh-huh.
really important, because when you're working through a mental health situation, it's not just one appointment that's going to help remedy it. You need a lifetime scholarship. And so that's what the foundation does. And I always say God named it because he did. He gets the credit for naming the foundation, and it's named in a beautiful way.
So tell us the story of how it got named.
So the therapist encouraged our daughter to pick the second word of the street name where her abuse had occurred, because she wanted our daughter to let go of the pain of the past and hold on to the promise of hope and good that she would be doing in the future through this foundation. So that word is field. And then the therapist looked out the window and picked the first thing that she saw, which happened to be a willow tree. So she named it Willowfield Foundation. Now, what God and God alone knew, Lindsay, was that the very place where I was working, miles and miles away, states away from my daughter, during the very moments where she was most vulnerable and abused, was on Willow Road in another state. So that was God's way of saying to me, let go of the pain of the past, let go of the guilt that was racking me, feeling that I was responsible and that I was a bad parent in some way, because that shame is not going to serve me or help anybody else, and to boldly step into his provision to do good through this
Mm-hmm.
foundation and help countless others.
I mean, I feel like parents listening who it doesn't even have to be as severe as having a child who has been trafficked or has attempted suicide, but just that like parental guilt that every parent has. When you say God just told me I need to let it go. How did you let it go?
Well, it's a daily decision, sometimes hourly, but it's a decision. It's not always a feeling, just like I don't feel forgiving. I don't feel
Mm-hmm.
forgiving. I choose forgiveness in different circumstances in life because that's what I need to do for me and to move
Mm-hmm.
forward. So it's a decision that I make. I've got an affirmation that I say daily, that God forgives me and I forgive myself. And I remind myself that I did the best I could with what I knew at the time. And my daughter is so generous about that too. She said, Mom, the whole plan was for you not to know. So you can't really be upset with yourself for not knowing because that was the whole plan was for you not to.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. It is just so scary that, you think about these things happening in kind of like back alleys and, seedy neighborhoods, but it's happening everywhere. It really, truly is. Do you know any statistics off the top of your head related to human trafficking or childhood suicide?
Well, especially for child abuse, I can say that I can say most of our society challenges, whether it is suicidal or drug addiction or alcoholism, the high percentage of it is rooted in some kind of abuse that's happened. So I can say that for sure. I can also say that it's thought to be 1 in every 4 children before the age of 18 have been sexually abused. And that is shocking. Now, the reality is more than half of the time it's not reported because children are afraid they won't be believed, or they are living with their abuser, or they're in a situation where they just feel they cannot come forward. And I can tell you that that is true, because as we've shared our story, how many people have come to me and told me about what's happened to them, and they've never told anybody before and they never reported it. It's very true that the number's larger than what we think. And that's why we've got to wake up. We've got to be responsible as adults, and we've got to pay attention to what's happening around us. And we've got to be present with our children to pay attention to what they're talking about and what they're experiencing. But I'll also tell you 90% of the time, the abuser is a trusted adult. It's not the stranger danger that we all thought it was. It's not always the internet. It's not always the way it's portrayed, especially trafficking on TV or movies, that somebody's kidnapped and taken to another country. That does happen. But in most cases, that's the minority. That's the very small fraction. It's happening in your city, in possibly your neighborhood, right under your nose. I'm telling you it is. And there are subtle signs you can pick up on it. But the main thing is that you be aware, and that you also be kind, because you don't know what other people may be going through and experiencing, in their lives.
Laura, I love every time that I get to share time and space with you and to learn more about the Willowfield Foundation and the work that you do with NAMI, and really helping parents and children to empower themselves to speak up when they think that something is going wrong. Where can people find out more information about you and the work that you do?
Sure. Well, you can go to trustyourgutfeelings.com is a great place to go. And we'll put some links to the resources for NAMI and also the Darkness to Light, Stewards of Children online training that you can take so that you can be aware and informed, and also the Willowfield Foundation.
All right, Laura Evans, thank you so much for being a guest today on the Lindsay Elmore Show.
Thank you, Lindsay.